Right, in the second video I'm going to be talking about how distribution of ethnic minorities in the UK has actually been changing over the last two censuses, so since 1991 and 2001, compared to the figures that we've got from the 2011 census, which still shows the clear bias of ethnic minorities to be living in London and large metropolitan areas, so for example in cities in the Midlands, in the northwest and the north of England. But there's clear evidence, as I'm going to show to you, of more residential mixing in the last 20 years. It's clear that the direction of most of these ethnic minority groups is outwards, so from traditional inner city urban areas where they've tended to be found towards suburban and increasingly rural areas. And I'm going to refer to a couple of slides just to illustrate what we mean by this. Okay, so these two slides give us some data from the 2011 census, and if we're looking at the slides or the slide on the left to start off with, we can see that yes, there is still very, very clearly this metropolitan bias in the sense of ethnic minorities. So here we see London and its surrounding areas still having large proportions of ethnic minority groups. Here we have Birmingham, we've got Bristol here in the west, we've also got the large urban areas here in the north of the country. But what it also shows, and I'm just going to try and point this out, is that we're increasingly seeing that areas slightly outside the centre of the cities are becoming increasingly diverse. So, for example, again, looking at the map on the left, we can see that yes, we've got the concentration of urban or of ethnic minorities in urban areas, but what we can see is that we have these areas, certainly in the outer areas of London, outer areas of Birmingham, and the outer areas of cities in the north, so Leeds, Sheffield, and also Manchester. And also we see other areas such as here's Bedford and Luton there in the middle, and this is Reading. So again, hinting at this increasing movement out of inner city areas to both suburban areas and slightly more rural areas than before. Now, if we look at the map on the right, we can see some similar patterns emerging, in that the percentage changes of ethnic groups other than white British, so here talking about ethnic minorities, is very much happening at the fastest rate outside of these urban centres. And the greatest relative growth of the population, note that I've said relative, not absolute there in terms of numbers, is in rural England and Wales. And I'm going to point to one particular area here, which is the Boston and South Holland districts in Lincolnshire around the Wash. Here, the ethnic minority population grew over threefold between 2001 and 2011, so by over 300%. And if we have a look at this slide, again, this suggests that there is increasing spread of populations. So this table is from a study from the University of Manchester, and they have come up with a measure called the index of dissimilarity, where 100%, so up here on the index, suggests that an ethnic minority group is completely separated from the rest of the population in an area or the country. And a 0% score down the bottom here suggests that there is a completely even spread of that ethnic minority population across a whole area or the whole country. And what it's showing is that certainly from 2001 to 2011 is that we've got this downward trend in separation. So certainly if we look at the green line, the orange line and the purple line, we're seeing that the degree of separation of the Bangladeshi population, and in particular the African population, also the Indian population, is that they're becoming more evenly spread through England and Wales. So I mean that's good data if you want to to talk about the increasing spread of ethnic minority populations. Yes, there's still the bias in London and these big metropolitan areas, but yes, also populations are becoming more and more spread. We've got falls of up to 13% of this on this index of dissimilarity since 2001, as drawn up by the University of Manchester. And again, just as an interesting slight aside, is we've got another measure drawn up by the Office for National Statistics, known as the ONS, and they came up with something called the Index of Diversity, so slightly different to the Index of Dissimilarity. This is the ONS. What they said is that what is the probability in an area that picking two people chosen at random would be from two different ethnic groups. And again, the evidence suggests that yes, London and large urban areas tend to have the highest diversity. So here we have Brent. Brent, of course, is here in northwest London, but also we have lots of other London boroughs, certainly with over 50% probability that two people chosen at random would be from two ethnic minority groups. But interestingly also we've got smaller towns such as Slough, Leicester and Luton where the probability is also quite high. Now the least diverse areas are those with high proportions of white population, and Easington up near County Durham, so up in this area of England, is actually the least diverse area, has a very high proportion of a white population. So the question is why is there increasing mixing and diversity? Well, I've put 4 bullet points here, and these are 4 important points. Firstly, we've got this decline of traditional secondary industries, heavy industries, manufacturing, engineering, and high rates of unemployment in inner city areas as our industry has tended to relocate to out-of-town areas. It's changed in nature from secondary to tertiary and quaternary. And so that has encouraged groups to leave their traditional areas of settlement, so the inner city areas, and move out, so migrate within Britain to different areas where employment prospects are better. A good example of this is where we have Eastern Europeans who have moved out to rural areas, such as those that we looked at earlier, Boston, South Holland, around the Wash. We've got good employment prospects there, particularly over the last 10 years in agriculture, so fruit picking, fruit packaging and processing, etc. Secondly then, we've got this idea of increasing assimilation and mixing. Second, third, maybe even fourth generation migrants now more comfortable living within the white population in white-dominated areas, and so therefore they're happier to move out and move to these areas, move away from their traditional communities. Thirdly, we've got obviously over the last 10, 15, maybe 20 years, we've got increasing size of our university populations, and this encourages internal migration. So ethnic minority students, graduates, then tend to settle in university towns where they've been to university or where graduate jobs are, and again that promotes this idea of internal migration, causing an increased mix, an increase in diversity across Britain, across the UK. And fourthly then, intermarriage between different ethnic groups. Again, encourages mixing and migration away from original areas of settlement. And here we're thinking about the idea of mixing. This is particularly important given the figures from the last census in 2011. This was the first time that the mixed population, so that's a box where populations say, well, you know, I'm of mixed race, it doubled in size from 2001, the mixed population, to over 1 million. And that shows the degree to which intermarriage, intermixing of ethnic groups has certainly encouraged more diversity. Finally then, I just want to talk a little bit about this idea of what we know as the term white flight. Now, white flight is the idea or the term given to describe the movement or the outward movement of the white population from certainly inner and outer areas of our cities to more rural areas and smaller rural settlements and towns. Now, the BBC published an interesting article a few months ago using data from the 2011 census. And what it suggested is that there has been, particularly in London, a clear outward movement of the white population from major urban areas. So if we're looking at London from these outer boroughs, so Enfield, Newham, Redbridge, Barking, Dagenham, Brent, Harrow, Hillingdon, Hounslow, Ealing, down here Croydon and Merton, outward movement, out of London to smaller towns and villages in rural areas. Ethnic minority groups, which I'm going to represent in blue, have then seemingly moved in either from abroad or from other areas of the country. And so what we're, or from other inner city areas. So what we're seeing, so this is our abroad arrow. So these are new arrivals. But also what we've tended to find is that we've got movement from inner city areas where ethnic minority populations are highest, tending to move out to suburban areas. So what we've got here then is the idea of succession. We've got the outward movement of the white population to rural towns and villages, and in their place ethnic minority groups have been allowed to spread. So freeing up of housing, ethnic minorities can then move out of inner city areas to suburban areas, and also new arrivals from abroad can also move straight into these suburban areas. And so we've got this idea of the minority advance. Minority advance. That's an important term, minority advance. Into these areas where the white population previously lived. Now, between 2001 and 2011, London boroughs lost 620,000 white people from their populations. And that's equivalent to a city the size of Glasgow leaving London. Now, the only boroughs to buck that trend were some of the inner city boroughs here. And they saw actually a small increase in white populations over that period. That could be for a couple of reasons. It could be the impact of gentrification, so this idea of affluent white families moving back in towards inner city areas where the housing stock is good and there is the improvements in services, high-end shops, facilities which are attracting population in, and also where the population can renovate old housing stock for large gains. But secondly, we've got the impact possibly of these large-scale inner-city redevelopment schemes. So if we look at here, we've got the impact potentially of the Olympic site, again attracting the white population back in towards central areas. So what does that mean? Well, looking at this map, we can see clearly that it is rural districts and areas, and here we've got that have experienced the greatest increase in white population since 2001. Here we've got the top 10. Again, they're all rural districts away from the major urban areas. A couple of impacts here. Firstly, that yes, this has allowed this minority advance succession of ethnic minorities from their traditional inner city heartlands in towards suburban areas, or even indeed into more rural areas. But what we're tending to see is that this has meant that white populations are tending to become ever more segregated from ethnic minority groups. So although boroughs or areas within our cities are becoming more diverse, they are becoming more diverse in terms of mixing of ethnic minorities rather than mixing of both ethnic minorities and the white population. It's the white population that seem to be moving out of these inner city and outer city areas, leaving ethnic minority groups to become dominant groups. And although they're becoming more diverse in terms of the mix of the ethnic minorities, so they're getting mixes of both black African, black Caribbean, Indian, Pakistani, Chinese populations and other white populations, what we're seeing is the white British population itself is becoming ever more segregated because of this move out to rural areas and rural districts. So, a little bit of information there just to summarise how the distribution of ethnic minorities is actually changing. There are noticeable changes from the 2001 census in the sense that we've got this succession or minority advance out of inner city areas, both towards suburban areas within our cities, but also to increasingly to rural areas. And that has meant that certainly ethnic minority groups are becoming more evenly spread across the country. Just to note as well, I will pop the link to this article, which was published on the BBC a few months ago, up on Schoology. Have a listen to it. It's quite interesting and just expands on some of the points that I've made. There's a good set of interviews from the reporter, which again brings it to life and talks about this movement of the white population as they improve their prospects economically out to rural areas.